what if you could erase every painful memory? I mean, like every heartbreak you've ever had and every trauma and every moment of regret that you've played over and over in your head and kept you awake at 3 a.m. in the morning, wishing that that conversation had gone differently. Now, this fantasy isn't new. In 1717, the poet Alexander Pope wrote these lines about a woman who had retreated from the world after a devastating love affair. He wrote, "How happy is the blameless Vestal's lot, the world forgetting, by the world forgot, eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, each prayer accepted and each wish resigned." And these lines became the title of Michel Gondry and Charlie Kaufman's 2004 masterpiece, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But here's the beautiful irony. Pope's poem itself intentionally contradicts its own promise. The entire work is about the impossibility of forgetting profound love and loss, and how that actually really matters. That the spotless mind may seem blissful, but it's essentially dead to human experience. And that's true of the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind too, as the movie shows us that remembering even the most difficult memories of a bad breakup, for example, is really important because all of those memories, in some fundamental way, make us who we are. So today, we're going to explore why this film isn't just a quirky sci-fi romance with a girl with different coloured hair, but a profound philosophical statement about the importance of memory, of identity, and what it really means to heal from trauma. Welcome back to Philosophical Film Club. The plot of the film itself is deceptively simple, although fair warning, of course, we're going to have some spoilers here in describing the film, but also the non-linear way the film unfolds itself is anything but simple. In getting to the plot, and reminding us of what happened in all of this film, I'll tell the story the straight ahead way, but that's not the way it happens in the film, and that's part of what makes the film so much fun. So, Joel Barish discovers that his ex-girlfriend, Clementine, has undergone some kind of procedure to erase all the memories of their relationship. Joel feels devastated and betrayed, and he decides to undergo exactly the same procedure at Lacuna Inc., which is such a cute name. But as the technicians begin deleting his memories of Clementine, something unexpected happens. Joel begins fighting to preserve those memories. He tries to hide Clementine in memories where she doesn't belong, desperately attempting to save some trace of their relationship, because while they're being deleted and he experiences that deleting, he suddenly realizes that those memories mean a lot to him. He effectively, through remembering and interacting with Clementine again in this dream state, falls back in love with her. And he realizes that even when talking to this version of Clementine, his version in his memories, perhaps he misunderstood her, and perhaps some of the difficulties that plagued their relationship. The film unfolds backwards and kind of forwards through their relationship, from the bitter end to the sweet beginning, and then back again, until we reach their first meeting on a beach in Montauk.
Hi there.
Hi.
And then we come back to it. And we also return in the present day, where these two, now strangers, meet and yet have an unexpected chemistry and connection. They go through those initial wonderful stages of falling in love. And then a package arrives from a disgruntled employee who herself is upset at the forgetting process she underwent at her own behest at the company. The packages contain Joel and Clementine's respective tapes, recounting their side of the story about how their now forgotten relationship went bad. The two meet after listening to their tapes, the bloom of their not new at all relationship now really off the rose, and they decide, in a hallway, burdened with all of this knowledge about how things went and how things could possibly be, that they'll try to love each other again.
Look what I found.
They'll choose the possibility of love in full knowledge of all the hurt that that might entail. And then the movie ends, the choice made. Now, you might just think that this is a clever narrative about the pain of breakups, but I think what Kaufman has really created here is a profound meditation on four crucial philosophical questions that go to the very heart of human existence and human identity. And the first is this: what is the relationship between memory and identity? Are we more than the sum of our experiences, or are memories just literally who we are? And that kind of leads us to the second question, which is, how should we relate to the painful parts of our past? Should we try to transcend them? Or is there something valuable even in our worst experiences? And third, what does it mean to live authentically? When we try to curate our past, are we being true to ourselves? Or are we engaging in some fundamental form of self-deception? And finally, what's the difference between forgetting and forgiving? Is healing really about erasing all our pain, or is there a deeper form of resolution that might be available to all of us? These aren't just abstract philosophical questions. They're intensely practical concerns that shape how we approach therapy, how we approach relationships, social media, and even our political discourse. Because as I'll argue in this video, I think that Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind offers answers to these questions that are both profound and deeply challenging to our contemporary assumptions about healing and growth. Let's start with the most fundamental question. Who are you? If I asked you that question, you'd probably tell me a story. You'd describe maybe experiences that you've had, or relationships that have shaped you, or moments of triumph and failure that have made you who you are today. But what you're really doing is you're describing your memories. And this insight that that's what we do when we talk about who we are goes back to one of the most revolutionary thinkers in Western philosophy, Augustine of Hippo, or St. Augustine, as you might know him. In his Confessions, written in the 4th century, Augustine made a startling claim about the nature of human identity. He argued that memory doesn't just contain the self, it is the self. That we are literally our experiences, not just the pleasant ones we choose to keep, but all of them, woven together into the continuous narrative that we call consciousness. Augustine discovered that memory is identity in the 4th century, and in the film, Joel discovers the same lesson, but it costs him $20,000 and it doesn't quite work, which, as I've always said, is philosophy, cheaper than you think. And watch what happens to Joel as his memories disappear. His panic isn't just about losing Clementine, it's also about losing a part of himself. The film brilliantly visualizes this by showing us how memory isn't like a computer hard drive where you can delete specific files. It's all connected together. It's more like a spider web where every strand connects to every other strand, and removing one can have unintended consequences. It's implicit in a really subtle moment in the film when Joel has Clementine's name removed. He also forgets the traditional song Oh My Darling Clementine as well. You know, the one that goes, oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine, something like that. And in the process, he actually deletes a childhood memory that was really valuable to him, his love for the cartoon Huckleberry Hound.
Oh my darling, what's her name?
And look at this scene where Joel attempts to hide Clementine in a childhood memory. It doesn't work because Clementine feels foreign there. She doesn't belong in that emotional context that is deeply attached and embedded to that memory. But more importantly, we should also notice how the memory itself starts to break down, how the faces become distorted, the environment becomes unstable. This is Charlie Kaufman showing us that memories aren't isolated units, but part of an integrated whole, a self. Which, when we try to surgically remove painful experiences, we're not just losing those specific moments, we're also destabilizing the entire structure of who we are. And this has profound implications for how we think about healing in the modern world. Because let's be honest, we live in a culture that's a little obsessed with what we call curation. We block people on social media, for example. We let go of toxic relationships. We try to move on from trauma by not thinking about it, but by forgetting it. The underlying assumption is that we can kind of edit our pasts and our experiences a bit like a film, keeping all the good scenes and cutting out the bad ones. But Augustine's insight, brilliantly illustrated in this film, suggests that this approach is not just impossible, but that it's fundamentally self-destructive. Our painful experiences aren't foreign objects lodged in our psyche that need to be removed. They're integral parts of who we are. And when we try to erase them, we start erasing ourselves. Because notice how Lacuna Technologies treats memory like data, like neutral information to be mapped and managed and then deleted at will. But the film shows us, through Joel's perspective, that actually that memory is alive and still with us, that it's dynamic and meaningful. It's not what we have, it's not a possession or a file, it's what we are. And Eternal Sunshine uses the power of cinema and story to show us what this really means in a really affecting way. And this brings us to one of the most challenging ideas in all of philosophy, and one that I think perfectly illuminates Joel's journey. It's Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence. So first, a quick summary of Nietzsche's concept of the eternal recurrence, or return, from his works The Gay Science and Thus Spake Zarathustra. The thought experiment he proposes goes a little something like this. So imagine a demon appeared to you in the dark of night when you were awake at 3 a.m. thinking about all of your suffering and says to you, you will live your exact life again and again, with all its suffering, all of its mistakes, all of its humiliations, not just once more, but countless times, exactly as it was, with no changes possible. And Nietzsche asks, when you find this out from this demon, would you despair or would you say yes to this fate? Would you affirm it? Nietzsche argued that this thought experiment reveals something profound about how we relate to our existence. If we would despair at the prospect of living our life over again, we're essentially saying that non-existence would be preferable to our actual experience. We're rejecting not just parts of our past, but our whole selves. Because you are who you are today because of everything that's happened, not just because bits of it. And you don't exist without the sum of all of your memories and all of your experiences. The big ones, the small ones, the incidental ones, the meaningless ones, the life-changing ones, the bad ones, all of them. Even your memory of this very video will be a part of your future self, which is worth a like, hype, and subscribe, right? And Joel begins the film in exactly this state of rejection, of the kind of self-undoing that Nietzsche describes and that he scorns. Joel's relationship with Clementine was painful, it was chaotic, it was destructive, so he wants it all undone. He wants to prefer a vision of himself that never experienced love and loss. He prefers a vision of himself that never existed and never will. He imagines himself that blessed Vestal Virgin. But watch what happens as that deletion process unfolds. As Joel moves backwards through their relationship, he begins to remember not just the pain, but also the joy, the growth, the ways that even their conflicts shaped him into somebody capable of deeper love and deeper appreciation. This really is the turning point of the film. Suddenly, Joel begins to fight to preserve those memories, even the bad ones. He's no longer trying to reject his past, but to affirm it, as Nietzsche advised everybody should. Even more remarkably, and as we've mentioned, he starts trying to hide Clementine in memories that predate their relationship, unconsciously recognizing that she's become a part of his fundamental identity, just like those memories before her. The philosophical climax, if you will, comes in the beach house memory. Joel knows the relationship is doomed. He's been living through its destruction. But rather than try to prevent it or to escape it, he accepts it. He chooses Clementine and their flawed love with the full knowledge of where it leads and the fact that it's doomed and that in a moment it's going to be gone. It's a beautiful moment. This is also what Nietzsche called amor fati, the love of fate. Not passive resignation to circumstances, but active affirmation of our entire experience, including its most painful dimensions. The film's structure itself embodies this philosophy. We end where we began, Joel and Clementine meeting on the beach. But this isn't just repetition, it's what Nietzsche would call eternal return, perhaps with a dash of philosophical consciousness. They're choosing each other again, but now with the full knowledge of their patterns, their incompatibilities, their capacity to hurt each other even. They're having their own startling, unique encounter with that little demon that asks them, would they do it over and over again. And they say,
Okay.
Okay.
okay. So it's not the most energetic affirmation in the world, but I think Nietzsche would recognize it as they're saying yes to their existences nonetheless. Now, some viewers, I think, have seen this ending as tragic, that they're doomed to repeat these cycles and these mistakes. But I think Nietzsche would see it as triumphant. They're affirming their experience so completely that they're willing to live it again, knowing its full cost. When Joel and Clementine say okay to each other, after hearing their own voices describe their worst qualities to each other, they're performing the ultimate philosophical act. They're choosing love, not despite its imperfections, but because of its full, complex reality. This is the opposite of the lacuna approach, which seeks to eliminate difficulty and pain. Eternal Recurrence asks us to embrace the totality of our experience, to say yes, not just to joy, but to sorrow, not just to success, but to failure, and not just to love, but to the loss. The question the film poses to us is this: would you live your life again exactly as it was? And I think your answer reveals whether you're truly living or merely just trying to survive. But choosing to affirm our past raises another really difficult, crucial question. What does it mean to live authentically? When we try to curate our experience and edit our history, or present a sanitized version of ourselves to the world, are we being true to who we are? Or are we engaging in what existentialist philosophers called bad faith? Martin Heidegger, who I've mentioned a few times on the channel, distinguished between authentic existence and what he called the they self, living according to what others expect rather than owning our actual experience. Authentic existence, to Heidegger, requires what he calls thrownness, which is a kind of accepting that we've been thrown into specific circumstances outside of our control, and relationships and experience, and we didn't choose them, but nevertheless they kind of partially constitute who we are. And Heidegger spent decades explaining what he thought authentic existence meant. And Kaufmann just had two people say okay to each other's flaws, and suddenly we get it. Turns out German philosophers use too many words. For me, the lacuna procedure represents the ultimate expression of the they self, or das Man. It allows people to conform to social expectations about how they should feel and what they should remember and what they should delete and just move on and forget about. You know, that kind of advice that sometimes friends want to give you when you're in pain, but they don't because they know it's not helpful, but they kind of just want to say, you know, why don't you just get over it and move on? And one of the reasons they want to do that is because they want to stop hearing about it. And lacuna is a little like that, because notice how clinical and detached the process is. Technicians in lab coats treating human experiences like malfunctioning software that needs debugging. Indeed, our stern doctor says,
Miss Kraczynski was not happy, and she wanted to move on.
I mean, Dr. Mierzwiak speaks about painful memories as if they're obviously pathological, as if any reasonable person would want them removed like a suspicious mole. But this assumes that there's some external authority that can determine what constitutes a meaningful life and the role a painful memory should play within it. It's the they self making decisions about what should constitute you and the authentic experience of you and what shouldn't. And the characters in the film, they just walk right past maybe the guilt and the ethics of erasing painful memories. But I can't even erase my browser history without feeling guilty. Some of us aren't really ready for this level of deletion. But Jean-Paul Sartre took this critique even further with his concept of bad faith, which is the way we deny a fundamental freedom and responsibility. When Joel chooses memory erasure, he's engaging in bad faith on multiple levels. He's denying that he chose to enter the relationship with Clementine. He's denying his responsibility for how it unfolded, and he's also denying his freedom to choose how to relate to that experience going forward and what to make of it. I mean, look how passive Joel is during the early stages of the procedure. At one point, of course, he's literally unconscious, letting others make the decisions about his consciousness. But as the procedure continues, something remarkable happens. He begins to assert his freedom. When Joel starts fighting to preserve his memories, he's reclaiming his authentic existence. He's saying these experiences are mine. I lived them. I chose them on some level, and I have the freedom to determine what they mean. And I think this connects to another existentialist thinker that we've talked about a lot on the channel, including, with my tragic mispronunciation of his name, the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, who wrote about many things, including the concept of repetition. For Kierkegaard, authentic existence isn't about having new experience constantly, but about the ability to choose your life again with full consciousness. It's not mere recurrence like Nietzsche. It's conscious. It's free choice. It's choosing the same. When Joel takes Clementine off the map into memories where she doesn't belong, he's performing an existentialist act of freedom. He's refusing to let external authorities, even the ones inside his own head, determine what his experiences should mean. But the film also shows us the philosophical problem with bad faith through the subplot of the Lacuna employees. Stan, Patrick, and Mary are all engaged in various forms of self-deception about their relationships and their desires. Patrick literally tries to live someone else's life, using Joel's erased memories as a script for seducing and romancing Clementine. This is bad faith, taken to its logical extreme. Instead of taking responsibility for his own authentic relationship to another person, he's playing a role based on somebody else's experience. And Mary's story is even more devastating. She's had an affair with Dr. Mierzwick, and she suffered when his wife has discovered it and then had the entire experience erased, only to fall for him again. She's trapped in a cycle of what Kierkegaard would recognize as repetition without consciousness, which is the opposite of, I think, what Kierkegaard thought of as authentic repetition. And there's also a Buddhist dimension to this authentic living that the film kind of explores too, because the first noble truth in Buddhism states that life contains suffering, but crucially, much of our suffering comes from our resistance to experience rather than the experience itself. Joel's evolution through the film mirrors the kind of Buddhist understanding of liberation. He moves from resistance, trying to avoid the pain of the relationship, to acceptance, recognizing that the pain and the joy are inseparable, to a kind of philosophical equanimity about the entire process. I think the film suggests that authentic existence requires us to own all of our experiences, not just the ones that fit our own preferred self-image, but with the full spectrum of our human complexity. When we try to edit our past, we're not becoming more authentic, we're kind of becoming less human. This brings us to the heart of what I think makes this film deeply philosophical and significant. It's heading to the insight that true healing doesn't come from forgetting our pain, but from learning to forgive it. And this isn't a religious forgiveness promising some kind of cosmic reward. This is forgiveness as a fundamental philosophical stance towards existence itself. I think the crucial distinction is this: forgetting seeks to undo the past, while forgiveness integrates the past into a livable present. The philosophical climax of the film comes in this extraordinary scene. Joel and Clementine are sitting at the beach house that's literally crumbling around them as the memory deletion nears its completion. They both know that their relationship is doomed. They know that they've hurt each other, and yet they choose to affirm all of that anyway. The scene embodies insights from several philosophical traditions about what forgiveness actually means. Emanuel Levinas wrote about the face of the other, the idea that encountering another person places us in a position of infinite ethical responsibility. We cannot reduce them to our projections, our needs, or our understandings alone. And watch how Joel looks at Clementine in this scene. He's not trying to change her. He's not trying to fix her or to make her fit his vision of what a partner should be or what he thinks she should be. He's recognizing her irreducible otherness, as Levinas might put it, her fundamental freedom to be exactly who she is, exactly as she is, even if that includes the capacity to hurt him. And that is what, for me, makes their final exchange so profound. When they acknowledge their worst qualities to each other, when Clementine admits that she's a fucked up girl who's looking for her own peace of mind, and Joel acknowledges that he's not a concept. They're practicing what Jacques Derrida, for example, drawing on Levinas, would call unconditional forgiveness. Now, Derrida we don't need to get too deeply into because it's complicated. But he argued that true forgiveness must be impossible. It must forgive the unforgivable. If someone asks for forgiveness for a minor slight, that's not really forgiveness, that's just politeness. But for Derrida, real forgiveness involves accepting somebody fully while knowing they have the capacity to hurt you again. Derrida argued that we, as magical human beings, can practice this. We can practice, he argued for, forgiving the unforgivable. But I have trouble forgiving someone for Severance spoilers, so we've all got a lot of work to do. Okay. It's one of those profound philosophical statements that crop up in cinema and leave a mark, at least for me. Not, I forgive you, with all of its implications of moral superiority and power dynamics, not the I love you with its romantic idealization, but okay. A simple acceptance of reality as it is. This little statement also connects to Spinoza's understanding of freedom and necessity. Spinoza argued that true freedom doesn't come from having unlimited choices, but from understanding the necessity of our circumstances and learning to affirm them. Joel and Clementine's okay represents this kind of philosophical freedom. They're choosing their relationship not because it's perfect, but because they understand it's necessary to who they are. The film's circular structure really reinforces this point. We're not watching a traditional narrative arc where problems get resolved and characters live happily ever after. We're watching what the film suggests is the actual structure of human relationship. Patterns that repeat, but which can be transformed through consciousness and acceptance and choice. And I think this has profound implications for how we think about healing from trauma, about ending relationships, and even about political reconciliation. The dominant cultural narrative at the moment, I'd argue, says that healing means moving on or letting go or leaving the past behind. But the film suggests that real healing involves learning to carry our past differently. Notice the contrast between Lacuna's promise of clean, surgical removal of pain and the actual messy, interconnected reality of human experience. The deletion process is sterile and technological and controlled, as I've argued, but real memory, and therefore I'd argue real healing, is messy and organic and chaotic and an alive process. The film doesn't promise that forgiveness will make everything better. Joel and Clementine, they'll probably break up again. They'll hurt each other in familiar ways. But they'll do so with consciousness, with choice, with the kind of radical acceptance that transforms suffering from something that happens to us into something that we actively engage with. And I think this is what the film kind of means by eternal sunshine. Not the absence of clouds, but the recognition that sunshine and shadow are part of the same sky, and that trying to eliminate one destroys the other. So what does this strange, beautiful film ultimately teach us about being human? Well, I think it reveals that our contemporary obsessions with optimization, with curation, and with the elimination of difficulty, it's not just misguided, it's philosophically and existentially destructive. When we try to smooth everything out and edit our own experiences, block the pain or erase our mistakes or delete the Facebook photos, we're not becoming healthier. We're becoming less real. And the film's wisdom lies in its recognition that growth doesn't come from transcending our limitations, but from learning to embrace them. We're not going to Andrew Huberman our way out of this. It means that healing doesn't mean eliminating pain, but transforming our relationship to it. It also doesn't mean the opposite, which is, raw dogging it and inflicting a whole bunch of suffering on ourselves just to feel like we're becoming better, because that's the same mistake the other way, really. And I think it's also trying to say that love doesn't require perfect perfection, but it does require the courage to accept imperfection. So in the age of social media blocking, cancel culture, and therapeutic approaches that promise to help us move on from the past, I think Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind offers a radically different vision. It suggests that the greatest human capacity isn't the capacity to forget our pain, but to forgive it and to integrate it into a life that's not perfect, but is real. The spotless mind that Alexander Pope wrote about isn't actually happy. It's empty. True sunshine doesn't come from the elimination of shadow, but from the full spectrum of human experience, especially when it's transformed through the philosophical practice of forgiveness. As Joel and Clementine would teach us, sometimes the most profound thing you can do is simply say, okay, and then to choose it again. But for now, that's it for Philosophical Film Club. So until next time, be wise and be kind, and don't let strangers delete your brain.